So we're on Daf Memvav 46a, and we're talking about the fires on the Mizbeach. On the what is this second line? Amar Abulasa Mishum Bar Kapara. So the Mishnah had mentioned how many fires are there on the Mizbeach. We had a machlokes on a regular day, 2, 3, or 4. Everyone agrees that there's the Malacha Gedola, which was the main fire where you burnt the karbonis, and the second fire which you took coals for the Ketores, the daily Ketores. We pass like Rav Yossi that says there's another one for Kiyam Ha'esh, the maintenance of the fire. What Rashi said means if you need a fire during the day, you'll be able to bring it from there to light the Mizbeach if the fire starts going down. And there was another shita. Rav Meir also holds you have a special one for the Ivarim, the limbs and the fats that were not burned from yesterday's karbonis. So you make a special fire for that. We pass like Rabbanan that you don't make a special fire for that. It goes back on the big fire. Once you make the Marocha Gedol, you'll put it together with today's karbonis. You put also yesterday's karbonis, and everyone agreed there was a special one for Yom Kippur, and to bring the coals into the Kodesh HaKadoshim for the Ketores. And yesterday's Gemara had all the drushes for those different fires. So now the Gemara starts on top. So more or less he says that well, we know already that Rav Meir says that there's a special fire for yesterday's karbanos. So he says if you have the limbs of the korban olah that were left over from yesterday's korban, so you make a special fire on its own. You make a fire on its own, and you arrange those limbs on that fire, which really we know already. The more that we noticed already. And then he adds on Vafilu b'Shabbos. Not only on a weekday do you do this kind of extra fire, but also on Shabbos, which is a big chiddush. That sounds very innocent, but it comes out that you're burning a weekday karbanos on Shabbos. Besides the fact he's saying you make a special fire for that, but included, taking it for granted, is that you are going to burn a weekday korban, the karbanos that were yesterday's korban tamid. You're going to burn it on Shabbos morning. So that we'll get to that, but that's the point that Bar Kapara said. Rav Elazar in the name of Bar Kapara. Rav Meir says you have a special fire for yesterday's korbanos always, and he says afilu b'Shabbos. That's the end of the statement. Now the Gemara says Ma'akim Mashman. What's his chiddush? Shamashi says that first the Gemara is asking about the main point that he said. He seemed to say two statements, even though you might say his whole chiddush was only Shabbos. That's why he's adding on that we didn't know till now. We knew Rav Meir has extra fire, but he's saying even on Shabbos. But it seems from the wording that it was two chidushim. First he says that you make a special fire for yesterday's karbanos, and then also ve'afilu b'Shabbos, even Shabbos. So first the Gemara is concentrating on the first chiddush that he said. Rav Meir says you have extra fire for yesterday's karbanos, and the Gemara says we know that. Ma'akim Mashma, what is he coming to teach us? Tanina, that's a Mishnah. It says b'chol yom hayu sham arba marochos. Every day there were 4. According to Rav Meir, there were 4 every day. And the Mishnah doesn't say what it is, but that seems simple to the Gemara, like we brought down yesterday, that the extra fire according to Rav Meir was for yesterday's karbanos. So what does Bar Kapara say? It's a Mishnah. The chiddush is even if yesterday's karbanos were apostle korban, there are some karbanos that are apostle. You're not supposed to bring it on whatever the psul will be. That's not going to be here. We're not going to talk about it. But there are some karbanos that are apostle, and it's so apostle that even if you put it on the mizbeach by mistake, you're supposed to take it down. That's called the Olu Yerdu. Even if they went up to the Mizbeach, take it down. But there are some karbanos that he shouldn't have brought up, but Imolu Lo Yerdu, that if they came up to the Mizbeach, so then like post facto, if it's on the Mizbeach already, so then burn it. So we're talking about those karbanos that Imolu Lo Yerdu. Rashi points out the Psulin, Hanach Imolu Lo Yerdu, if they're not so possible, that if they came up to the Mizbeach so they don't go down. So Rav Meir says that I'd say that you make a special fire for yesterday's karbanos, even if yesterday's karbanos were possible, if they were Imolu Lo Yerdu. So the point seems to be that if they were apostle korban, it was supposed to not to be brought on the mizbeach. They brought it up and they burnt it, but it didn't get burnt. The next morning, when you're making the new fire, you still have these limbs of yesterday's korban which were apostle, but once they're up on the mizbeach, but you don't take it down. So that's considered an extra chiddush that Rav Meir says you make a special fire for them. You might have thought that you have to burn them, but not to make a special fire. They don't deserve a special fire. So the chiddush is that you even make a special fire for them. So that's the chazar over that so far. But we knew from the Mishnah that Rav Meir says you have a special fire, which we know is a special fire for yesterday's karbanos. But the Bar Kapara said that even if yesterday's karbanos were puzzle in a way that you shouldn't have brought it on the mizbeach, only if you brought it, you leave it there already. Even that also gets a special fire if they were left over till the morning and you have to still burn it. So you don't put it onto the big fire like the Rabbanan will say. They deserve a special fire also. The Gemara, and that's why Bar Kapara said it, even though we know of Meir, but this was his added chiddush, afilu l'psula, even for psula. The Gemara continues, dafka shemash labena or, aval lo mash labena or lo. This is one more condition necessary. Mash labena or. The word mash Moshel means like to dominate. I don't have a good translation. I saw Ashford just says that the fire took hold of it. They're not saying an exact translation. Rule. That means the fire ruled over it. We conquered it. It took it over. So that's the idea. That means the fire, even if it caught fire, Mash labena or means that the fire really took hold of it. And it's that's a certain stage of getting consumed. It's not yet consumed, it's still there. But during the night, the fire that it was burning, it was enough that it already took hold of it. Well, yes, please.
I think this is worth hearing, even though you'll understand not direct relevance. There's a famous, I think it's a gra, Ki Hashem Mamlucho Moshel Bagoyim. So the definition.
I want to hear it, but it's like it's too much. Like the sugi is too much involved right now to go off on the side. But please, please do.
Dominate. Keneged Ratzon, domination. The fire dominates whatever substance it is burning in. That's all it means. It's domination.
Yes, any fire is going to dominate, not because the person agrees, no one's agreeing to get burned. Good. Okay, good. So this level that we say that the Pasal Korbanos get their own fire is only provided that the fire had already consumed it enough to be considered that it took hold of it, it dominated on it. Avalon mashlabena or low, but the word or doesn't. The word or is not light. Or is light, but or is fire. Depends if it's sort of cholam or malupim. So only provided that the fire already took hold of it. So just to take the stop over there, that it comes out that if the korban was kosher, a kosher korban of yesterday, so then it gets its own fire for today. When you rebuild the fire for today, so then yesterday's korban has got their own fire. But if it was a pasal korban, so then only if the fire had already, yesterday's fire had already burnt it well, Moshel ben Ha'or, it's still not burned. You still have what to burn still. You have to continue burning the rest. But if it was already Moshel ben Ha'or from yesterday, so then you'll give it its own fire. But if not, if it was not Moshel ben Ha'or, then it seems you will burn it, but on the regular fire with all the rest of the korbanos, then you're not going to make a special fire for it. That was one version. Ikadami, others have a different version. That this condition that we only are going to make a special fire, according to our mayor, is if it's Moshel ben Ha'or, is no difference if the korban was kosher or puzzle. We came into the old sugi now because it was a puzzle korban, but now according to the Sikadami, this is new information that we didn't know about in Rav Meir in general. Rav Meir says you make a special fire for yesterday's korbanos. That's only provided that the korban of yesterday was already burnt up, conquered by the fire, held on. The fire took hold on of it already yesterday, last night. Then you make a special fire for those korbanos when you want to burn it on the next day. But if not, if it was not Moshel ben Ha'or, no difference if it's kosher or puzzle. The first lesson is that only if it's puzzle, you have to have this condition. If it's kosher, you'd make a new fire, even if it was not Moshel ben Ha'or. According to the Ikadamri, even if it's a kosher korban, also Rabbi will not say it gets its own fire, only if it was Moshel ben Ha'or. That's the end of that sugya. We don't pass like all that because we don't pass like our mayor. We pass in that you don't make a special fire. You always have, you put it back onto the Marocha Gedola. You make a new fire. Yesterday's fire went out already. You're making Marocha Gedola and you put on yesterday's korbanos. Like the Gemara said, first you take it off the yesterday's fire, which is already burnt out. You put on the Mizbeach, on the Kevesh, on the Sovet, like the Gemara said. You rebuild today's fire, and then you put yesterday's korbanos on it also. So we don't pass like all this. This is all going just to explain Rabbi Meir. But the next sugya probably is going to be Nogea to us also. And we're on about 12 lines down. The first word is in Afilu b'Shabbos. This is now, we're quoting now back to what Bar Kapara said up on top. He said Afilu b'Shabbos. On the fourth line, he said Afilu b'Shabbos. That Rabbi Meir holds that you have this extra fire even if it's Shabbos. And now the Gemara is going to go on that. Afilu b'Shabbos, Tanina, this point that your Bar Kapara says that Rabbi Meir holds you make an extra fire even on Shabbos, which means for yesterday's korbanos, that's also a Mishnah. Before I was pointing out that it's a chiddush to make it on Shabbos because you're going to be burning yesterday's korbanos, a weekday korban on Shabbos. But the Gemara is not focusing on that chiddush. The Gemara says it's pashut. You do make a special fire because it says vayom chamish. So this is a advanced kasha, so to speak. It's what does it say? In Yom Kippur, you make 5 fires, but the 5 fires includes the 4 plus the extra one of Yom Kippur. But what are the 4? According to Rav Meir, that means one of them is for yesterday's karbanos. Every Yom Kippur is like a Shabbos. The chiddush of Shabbos is that today's Shabbos, the day that you're not allowed to start make fire, and to burn yesterday's karbanos today, like we're going to call it soon. The Gemara is not going to call it, but we're going to call it Olas Chol b'Shabbos. You're making a weekday korban. You're burning a weekday korban on Shabbos. That's a chiddush. It could be that Olas Shabbos b'Shabbatot, like the Gemara says in Shabbos, that you're allowed to burn a Shabbos korban on Shabbos, but to burn a weekday korban on Shabbos is a chiddush. And every Yom Kippur is like that. There's no difference between Shabbos and Yom Kippur. If it says that you're allowed to do it on Yom Kippur, that you're burning the Erev Yom Kippur. If it means, again, if you have 5 fires on Yom Kippur, what does 5 fires mean? One for the Merach Gedolah of today's Karbanos, one is going to be for the Ketores, one is going to be for the Kiyam Ha'esh, the maintenance of the fire, one is going to be for yesterday's Karbanos, and one is going to be for Yom Kippur. What does yesterday's Karbanos mean? It means the Erev Yom Kippur Karbanos. That's a regular weekday. Erev Yom Kippur is a regular weekday. So if you make on Yom Kippur 5 fires, that means one of them is for the weekday Karbanos of yesterday. So that's like every Shabbos. Every Shabbos, if you make it on Yom Kippur for every Yom Kippur, so you should make it on Shabbos for every Shabbos. That's conscious that it's not a chiddush. Bar Kapara seem to say a chiddush, a filu b'Shabbos. That the Meir says extra fire for yesterday's karbanos even on Shabbos, even though it's a weekday korban. Of course, it says on Yom Kippur you make 5. That means you're making it for every Yom Kippur. That's a weekday korban. Tanina by Yom Chomish, it says on Yom Kippur you make 5 fires. That means on Yom Kippur you're making a fire for every Yom Kippur's karbanos. So you see from there that you make it on Shabbos also. Rav Acha bar Yaakov Itzrich. Rav Acha bar Yaakov says no. We wouldn't be able to derive from the Mishnah that you'd make it extra fire even on a regular Shabbos. It could be that the only time you make 5 fires is one Yom Kippur, a certain Yom Kippur, not every Yom Kippur. But when Yom Kippur comes out on Sunday, so Erev Yom Kippur was not a regular weekday. Erev Yom Kippur was Shabbos. And over there, then I might think that you're allowed to burn yesterday's karbanos on Yom Kippur because it wasn't a weekday korban, it was a Shabbos korban. In that case, Rav Meir is going to say there are 5 fires on Yom Kippur. Maybe Rav Meir would hold in the middle of the week that Yom Kippur came out on a regular weekday, came out on a Tuesday, so then the yesterday's karbanos is a Monday, regular weekday, so then you wouldn't be able to burn the weekday karbanos on Shabbos, and you surely wouldn't make an extra fire. So Kamash Malan, that's why you have to say Afilu b'Shabbos. One more line before we talk a little bit. Amarava, Manai the Lok Chash. Who's this who doesn't care about his flour? Flour, the flour. And they talk like Kemach. And they bring down Rashi and other places says that when you grind something into flour, so you have to see which is the psolas, which is good, the different grades. It has some bran over there, you have some things that have the psolas. And Lo Chash Lakim means he doesn't care what he's grinding, whatever comes out is all the same. And that's his expression to say that you're not grinding well. That it's true that you have first the chitim, you have the whole grain, then you have to grind it to make bread out of it. But you have to see what you're getting. So that's his criticism to say that he's not thinking what he's saying. He's not grinding well because the question is not a question. It says in the Mishnah that they made every day. They made 4. Even besides the point about the Gemara a second ago just said from the Diak of Yom Kippur you make 5. What's our only done? The whole subject we're talking about is Rav Meir that says that you make a fire to burn yesterday's karbanos. Is it even if today's Shabbos and yesterday was a weekday? That's the subject we're talking about. Are you going to burn the weekday karbanos on Shabbos? So first the Gemara tried to bring a raya from the fact that in Yom Kippur you have 5. That's like Shabbos. And Yom Kippur is like Shabbos, and you're doing 5. You're doing for yesterday. That the Gemara got out of it. Could be yesterday was Shabbos also. Yesterday was Shabbos. Today's Yom Kippur. But Rabbi says, what are you all talking about? It says every day they did 4. Every day doesn't mean 6 days a week. Every day means 7 days a week. So that means he said already that even on Shabbos you make a fire to burn the Erev Shabbos karbanos. And the more ends off kasha that he thinks that's a kasha that of course Rav Meir himself says that you make a fire on Shabbos to burn the weekday karbanos. So just to point out how we'll learn the Gemara, how to go through the Gemara, and just to point out the difficulty. If we're going to learn it simple and it should go smoothly and easily and probably pretty fast. We'll probably end early today because it's a very complicated Gemara and really could take very long. And I also going to get confused. But there's a simple way to learn the Gemara, and just to point out the difficulty, and just we're going to avoid the whole difficulty. We have many Gemaras. We ourselves have the Gemara in Shabbos and the Gemara in Pesachim that says that you're not allowed to burn a weekday korban on Shabbos. The Gemara said many times, oh, Shabbos b'Shabbato. It's a Shabbos 113, and also we had in the Pesachim, they bring down in I think 94 or something like that, that it says you're not allowed to burn the B'tei Karbanos on Shabbos. And the Gemara even went so far to say that every Pesach, this is the Gemara Pesachim, that every Pesach that you burn the Korban Pesach, and you make the Korban Pesach on the 14th, are you allowed to burn the fats on the following night, which is on the night, which is the Leil Seder, on the night of the 15th. Usually, Kabbalah, you're allowed to burn Hektek Halav Meivorim is Yom Balayla, Tochatzos maybe, but you're usually allowed to burn all the Kabbalahs of a certain day. You're allowed to burn at night also. So every Erev Pesach, you have so many Korban Pesach, Korban Pesach, so you have many fats to burn. Are you allowed to burn it at night, into the night? So we would have thought, yeah, of course, that's the regular system. But the Gemara says no, because every Erev Pesach is a weekday, and Pesach is a Yom Tov. And just like you're not allowed to burn a weekday Korban on Shabbos, you're not allowed to burn a weekday Korban on Yom Tov. And the Gemara says that's the Gemara comes out. The law is that you're not allowed to burn the chalavim, the fast of the Korban Pesach. You're not allowed to burn on Yom Tov at night. Only in one case where it comes out on Shabbos. If Erev Pesach came out on Shabbos, so then you're burning a Shabbos Korban on Yom Tov. Because Erev Pesach was Shabbos and it's Docha Shabbos, and Korban Pesach is Docha Shabbos. So then you'd be allowed to burn the fast. And the Gemara says, you're going to say that's what the pasuk is talking about? And the Gemara says, yeah, that's what the pasuk is talking about. The pasuk that says, that's mashma, that you're allowed to burn the fats at night is only the case when Shabbos came out, Erev Pesach came out on Shabbos. So we had many sugyas, and it was taken for granted that you're not allowed to burn a weekday korban on Shabbos. And this Gemara says you are allowed to. That's a big kasha, a big problem. And to make things simple, we're just going to go to our Gemara and just point out that there's another Gemara that says the opposite. And on our Gemara is going to be a nidon, a whole subject. It doesn't even use the terminology we were talking about, Olas Shabbos b'Shabbat, Olas Chol b'Shabbos. It doesn't even use that terminology, which seems like the two Gemaras are like forgetting about each other. So the Rishonim has the kasha. And just to get through the Gemara easily, we'll just, if it's okay, just to ignore that kasha or put it in the freezer. Like just to say that this is what our sugi says, there's another sugi which contradicts. At the end, I would say maybe a pshat, how the Rishonim try to reconcile it, and maybe it comes la'alacha also. But just to go through the Gemara simply, I think that's the simple way to do it. So what we just learned so far is that Rav Meir, not only does he burn the korban of weekday on the Shabbos, he makes a special fire also. The Gemara seems to be revolving around Rav Meir that makes a special fire. But it could be that it just came in over here because Agav, you see that if he makes a special fire, that means he's burning the weekday korban on Shabbos. But the issue that is to be spoken about is the fact that you're burning a weekday korban on Shabbos. A special fire, not a special fire. How are you allowed to? There's no difference if you make a special fire or you put it onto the fire that's there anyway. You're not allowed to burn on Shabbos for nothing. And here it says that you're allowed to burn the weekday korban on Shabbos. So that's what the Gemara said so far. And we're leaving it as a kasha that someplace else the Gemara says you're not allowed to. So that was the first sugya, and it said afilu b'Shabbos, and the Gemara spoke about, do you see so? Is it a chiddush? Do you see it in the Mishnah already? Rava says that maybe you see it because it says b'chol yom. B'chol yom means every day of the week. It doesn't only mean 6 days a week. Also, we tried to bring a raya from the fact that it says on Yom Kippur there are 5, and one of the 5 would mean a fire for yesterday's karbanos, which usually would be a weekday. That the Gemara said maybe not. Maybe yesterday was Shabbos. But the Gemara came out, if it's a chiddush or not, the Gemara came out that Bar Kapara said so. Bar Kapara said so, and Rava agreed to that. Maybe it was Pashut, but the Gemara came out that you do burn the weekday karbanos on Shabbos, and according to me, even make a special fire for it. And then the Gemara says, "Upliga the Rav Huna." This statement of Bar Kapara argues on Rav Huna. The first one on the line is Huna. Upliga the Rav Huna. Dama tchilasa docha, sofa ina docha. Rav Huna argues on this whole statement that we said that weekday korban, you're allowed to burn the weekday korban on Shabbos. Rav Huna says you're not allowed to. Means this whole sugya that we're talking about, that we say, oh, the Gemara says someplace else you're not allowed to. The Gemara says, Rav Huna says you're not allowed to. What does he say? Tchilas hadocha, sofa ina docha. Tchilas hadocha means that the beginning of the korban, which would mean the korban which is starting on Shabbos, the Shabbos korban, that you're allowed to bring a korban tamid on Shabbos, and you do the shchita and the zrik, whatever you have to do, you're also allowed to burn that korban also, because it's a Shabbos korban. But sofa ina docha. But if it's only the tail end of a weekday korban, then you're not allowed to burn it. This mamish is the subject we're talking about. That if you are allowed to burn a weekday korban on Shabbos, till now we said you are allowed to, and Rav Huna says that you're not allowed to. But then the Gemara continues and says that it's not so simple that that's what Rav Huna said. Those words, he said like 5 words. Those are the 5 words that Rav Huna said. And so far the Gemara thinks that those words mean that the tail end of a weekday korban is not Docha Shabbos. So that argued on what we said till now. Because till now we said that the weekday korban is offered on Shabbos. Now the Gemara goes to analyze Rav Huna's statement that he just said, Gufa, we just finished saying, Rav Huna, Tamid, the korban Tamid, Chilas Adocha, Sofein Adocha, the beginning of it, the Shchita, the Zrika is Docha Shabbos, but it's Docha. I said the word Shabbos, which I wasn't going to talk about now. We understood so far that I mean Shabbos. And Sofein Adocha, the tail end, is not Docha Shabbos, which would mean that if it was a Friday korban, you're not allowed to burn it on Shabbos. But the Gemara says that's not so simple. The translation we just said in Rav Huna is not so simple. And it comes now, Machlokes, what Rav Huna meant to say. My Einadocha. What do the words mean? Einadocha. Sofa Einadocha. What does it mean? It's not Docha. It doesn't override. What doesn't it override? So it comes now, Machlokes Rav Chisda and Rabba or Rava. And I'm a little bit surprised that Rav Chisda and Rabba, if anybody could help me over here, that Rav Chisda and Rabba are arguing what Rav Huna said. I don't recall that to be like that. Rav Huna is not a Mishnah. It comes out Rav Chisda and Rabba are going to argue what Rav Huna meant to say. It seems a bit strange to me, but that's what it seems. That's what it seems to say. If anybody knows
Rav Huna goes back
how much earlier is Rav Huna that Rav Chisda and Rabba are arguing what Rav Huna said? Usually, maybe it's not a problem.
Understand what the words of the Amorah.
Yeah, but they're pretty much the same. I don't recall that they're very much later. They seem to be okay, but maybe it's not even one generation later. Rav Chisda was later. And Rabba, yeah, you don't have Machlokes and all Rabba and Rav Huna. They're not very contemporary. Rabba and Rav Huna, that seems to ring a bell. I don't know. But
it's always a question whether what they heard him say was exactly what he said.
Okay, but here the way the Gemara seems to say is that Rav Huna said a statement, and Rav Chisda and Rabba are going to argue what Rav Huna said, what he meant, not the word. The words he said. What do you mean? Rav Chisda Amar Dochas Shabbos ve'ena Dochas Atama. Even when he said, so let me just highlight these words, Sofo Einadocha. We're all coming to explain what these words, Sofo Einadocha means. That the end of the korban tamid is not Docha. What is it not Docha? The Chisda says, even when it says that it's not Docha, it is Docha Shabbos. But what does it mean, Einadocha? Einadocha is Atuma. That all Rav Huna meant to say that it doesn't override Tumah. According to Rav Chisda's explanation, Rav Huna has nothing to do with our subject. We're talking about Shabbos the whole time. Our whole discussion we've been having about Bar Kapara, Rabba, they said that it's Docha Shabbos. But according to Rav Chisda, Rav Huna wasn't talking about Shabbos. He was talking about Tumah. What does the underline that? Eina Docha means Eina Docha Esa Tumah.
What is the tumah? What exactly is the?
What does tumah mean? Tumah means that there's a korban that was docha tumah. What's a korban docha tumah? So we had many times like tumah hutru b'tzibur, tumah duchoy b'tzibur. So if there's a korban tzibur that was tamei and you did it anyway, so now Rav Chisda is going to say, Rav Huna meant that only tchilasa docha, seif and docha. That you're allowed to do the shchita, you're allowed to do the zrika, but you can't do the end of the korban. So a korban which was tamei and you brought it anyway like you're supposed to, but you're not allowed. You're not going to put it on the mizbeach. You're not going to burn the korban on the mizbeach. A huge chiddush. We learned a couple of places about tumah t'chuy b'tzibur. We learned a little bit about it in Shabbos and Tzachim a big sugya, and we pass in tumah t'chuy b'tzibur that is pushed away. It's not permitted. It's overridden. And here it says that you're only allowed to do the shchita and the zrika. Makes the korban the minimum what's necessary to make the korban kosher, but to burn the limbs on the mizbeach, that yields to the korban without that. So you're not allowed to burn the korban on the mizbeach.
Why is he going on to the out of the
He's saying that Rav Chisda is saying that Rav Huna never spoke about. You misunderstood Rav Huna. Rav Huna never spoke about Shabbos. Rav Huna said Tamid Chilasa Docha Sofa Eina Docha, and Rav Chisda is explaining he's talking about Tumah. He's not talking about Shabbos. He also agrees it's Docha Shabbos. So it comes out according to Rav Chisda's explanation of Rav Huna. So what the Gemara said a few lines ago, Pliga the Rav Huna, that the whole sugi before was arguing Rav Huna because Rav Huna says that it's not Docha Shabbos. No, you misunderstood Rav Huna. Rav Huna didn't say that. Rav Huna said it's not Docha Tumah, but he also agrees that it's Docha Shabbos. And according to that, he also agrees that if you have an Erev Shabbos korban, you're allowed to bring it on Shabbos, even though it's a weekday korban, you're allowed to burn it on Shabbos. He didn't argue. And Rabba, this says here Rabba, it says in the Sani should be Rabba Amar Doches Atuma Ve'ena Doches Shabbos. He's explaining Rav Huna the way we understood until now, that he meant to say Eina Docha Es Shabbos. So we have here the words of Rav Huna were Sofa Eina Docha, but we don't know what that means. Rav Chisda says he meant to say it's not Docha Tuma, but it would be Docha Shabbos. And Rabbi said he meant to say it's not Docha Shabbos, but he also would hold, he'd hold it's Docha Tuma. So it comes out, everyone says that Eina Docha is only one of two things. Something it is Docha. Even when he says Sofa Eina Docha, but the question is it talking about Shabbos or talking about Tumah? According to Rabbi, he's talking about the way we thought he's talking about, that he holds that the weekday korban is not Docha Shabbos, the tail end of a korban, a weekday korban is not Docha Shabbos, and he argues on everybody and those who said before that it is. But as far as Tumah, he would say that if you have a korban that was brought for Tumah, then you would be allowed to even burn it. Not only to do the shechita this week, you'd be allowed to burn it also. The Gemara continues. It's the same Gemara, same subject going on. Amalei Abaye le Rabba. L'didach kasha l'afchista kasha. Rabba and Afchista are arguing Pshat and Rav Huna, and Abaya is asking Rabba that I don't understand you, I don't understand your opponent, Afchista. Both of you I don't understand. L'didach kasha ma'ishna tumah dechsev b'moado afilu b'tumah Shabbos nami b'moado afilu b'Shabbos. Or Afchista kasha ma'ishna Shabbos dechsev b'moado afilu b'Shabbos tumah nami b'moado afilu b'tumah. His kasha is short. That where do you learn out that Shabbos is override, the Korban Tamid overrides Shabbos, and the Korban Tamid overrides Tumah. It's the same pasuk. It's one pasuk. It says you should be in the Korban Tamid b'moado in its time. In its time means like a blanket statement. It's time, and even if everyone's Tamid, be in the Korban anyway. Even though it's Shabbos, be in the Korban anyway. So there's one pasuk that says both things, that the Korban Tamid overrides both Tumah and Shabbos. How come you're saying these differences? Everyone is saying that only applies to one, either Tumah not to Shabbos or Shabbos not to Tumah. And he says, I don't see the difference. If you say that one of them is Docha, and you say more the overrides, so even the Aktori, you say not only the Shechita and the Zrika, even the burning of the Korban, so there shouldn't be a difference between the two. Both of you don't make sense. How come one yes, one not? Both of them, either both of them yes or both of them not. It's a package deal because the same source for both of them that it says B'moado. Just see the words inside. He says to you is difficult, and to Chisda is difficult. To you is difficult. How come you say that Tumah does override? Because it says B'moado, that word B'moado, quotations. It says in the Torah B'moado in its time. And you learn there even Tumah, that's why it overrides. So Shabbos Nami, it's the same word, B'moado, Afilu B'Shabbos. You should say that it overrides Shabbos also, even the tail end, so forth. And according to Chisda, it's opposite kasha. How come you say Shabbos is doch? Because it says B'moado, even Shabbos. So Tumah also should override because it says B'moado, Afilu B'Tumah. So that's the question in short. Why are both of you differentiating between Shabbos and Tumah? There should be no difference. Amalei, so Rabba told to Abaye, lo l'didi kasha, lo l'Afchista kasha. It's not difficult on either of us. Both of us have a reason to differentiate. L'didi lo kasha, Rabba is the one who said that it is docha Tumah, it's not docha Shabbos. What is it? That's to say what that means again? That if you had a korban that was brought to Tumah, like the korban Sibor was docha, the korban Tumah, everyone was Tameh, and the Kohen was Tameh, you brought the korban Tumah even though it was Tameh. And he says that you even allowed to burn it. Not only are you allowed to shecht it and do this rika, even allowed to burn it also. How come? Because so far kitchilaso. I say that the end is the same as the beginning. It means I say there's no difference. That tumah the amad beis tumah the tchilaso bar mitcha tumahu sofanami dachi. The beginning, the korban which is brought to tumah, you're allowed to shecht it, you're allowed to do this rika. So then the end also is docha. You're allowed to burn it also. If the beginning of the korban is docha, so the end of the korban is docha. But Shabbos, a very simple answer, that Shabbos, the Chilas Olaba Nitcha Shabbos, who, right? So Fanami Lo Dachi. Well, he says very simple answer. It's true that Shabbos is Docha, the Korban Tamid is Docha Shabbos, but that's only the Korban Tamid of Shabbos is Docha Shabbos. But the Korban Tamid of Erev Shabbos, it never says that's Docha Shabbos. So if the beginning of the Korban is Docha Shabbos, so the end of the Korban is also Docha. That means, let's say the korban the Tamid of Shabbos. So yes, you're allowed to burn it also. We're not just saying that you just do the Shechita and the Zrika and then you leave it to Motzei Shabbos to do the Eivorim. You're allowed to burn the korban on Shabbos also because the beginning of the korban was Shabbos. But on an Erev Shabbos korban, that's not a kash on me. If the Shabbos korban is docha, doesn't mean that the Erev Shabbos korban is docha. So therefore, even though I say that by a korban which is brought to Tumah, you are allowed to burn the korban also, not only to do the Shechita and the Zrika, you're also allowed to burn the korban on the Mizbeach, even though it's tamei. That's true because the whole korban is docha. But Shabbos, I just say that the Shabbos korban is docha. I don't say that the tail end of a weekday korban is docha. So Rabbi says that according to Rav Huna, a weekday korban does not override Shabbos. And I'll also explain Rav Chisda, fourth line. Rav Chisda lo kasha sofa kitchilas alesle. First, he doesn't know the Maisvara. He says that when it's docha Shabbos, so it's docha Shabbos altogether. Therefore, he says that even the tail end of a weekday korban is also docha. But how come Shabbos is different than Tumah? Shabbos the hutra hu b'tzibur sofa nami dachi. But Tumah the techuya hu b'tzibur chilasa dika kapara dachi sofa lavi kapara lo dachi. He says there's a difference between Shabbos and Tumah as far as sofa, as far as burning the korban. He says in the way that it overrides that tzibur, the korban Tumah overrides it. Is it called hutra or is it called the chuya? We have the sugya in as far as tumah the chuya b'tzibur, tumah hutra b'tzibur. That means that when the Torah says that you bring a korban b'tumah, a korban tzibur doesn't mean that it's permitted, like no problem at all, a green light. Or it means that like you have to do it, but like with Bakoshi, like difficulty, we have to do it, but it's overriding it, but not easily. So you do the minimum. That's what the Gemara is saying. There's a difference between Shabbos and Tumah. The hard difference is that Tumah and Korban Tzibor is a clash which doesn't necessarily have to happen. If it happens, what do you do? That Tumah comes against the Korban Tzibor. So, but Shabbos, when the Torah says it's supposed to be a Korban Tamid 7 days a week, so it's not saying if Shabbos comes out. Shabbos always comes out. So that means that the Torah says it's mutter. That's not called Techuya. It's not like with a heavy heart of being a Korban Tamid. The post can talk about the famous question if Pikuach Nefesh is a Hutra, Shabbos Hutra, Shabbos is Techuya. When it comes to Pikuach Nefesh, someone has to be Mechal Shabbos in order to save a life. Is not called Techuya or Hutra. Over there is what to talk about because it's like a clash. It's like Tumah that it happened to be. But the fact that the Korban Tamid, that Korban Tzibor is Docha Shabbos, that's not called the Docha. That's called that Hutra. You're allowed to bring it. So the Gemara is saying that Rav Chisda will say that only on Shabbos, the Korban Tzibor of Shabbos over there is Hutra, and therefore you're allowed to even burn it also. And even though the tail end, you're also allowed to do it. But by Tumah, over there he says that you should not burn it because it's the tail end. It comes out, just to point out where we finished the sugya, now it's not starts a mamash new sugya, that's the end of the first sugya. And it came out that there's a machlokis. If the tail end of a weekday korban, are you allowed to burn it on Shabbos? There comes the big machlokis. And the pella is that there's sugyas other places where we said in Shabbos and Pesachim says you're not allowed to, and Gemara seems to ignore it. That's an issue. And there's a second issue. It talks about Tumah, that we hold Tumah T'chuyi B'tzibur. There's machlokis in Pesachim, Hutra B'tzibur, T'chuyi, Gemara goes T'chuyi, that's how we paskin. And here it says in machlokis, Rabbi and Rav Chisda, if you're going to even burn it also. Do you even burn the korban that's brought Tumah? Rabbi said yes, Kisofo and Rav Chisda says, since it's Tumah T'chuyi, so then no, you can't burn it. I don't know I didn't see what we paskin about this case about Tumah, because we paskin Tumah T'chuyi. It should come out that maybe according to Rav Chisda, you should not burn it. You just bring the korban, shchita zrika, but you don't burn it. Rabbi will argue, so I didn't see, I want to look up at the Chafetz Chaim what he says about this, but that's one machlokis. As far as the first machlokis, so we have this sugya which has the machlokis, if you bring a weekday korban on Shabbos, if you burn the weekday korban on Shabbos, and other Gemaras, other places says that for sure you don't. And the machlokis, that's the point that the machlokis was shown that they say, without going into the whole sugya, but the Gemara said in the beginning of the sugya today, there's a concept called Moshla Ben Ha'or, that the fire already dominated, took hold of it. So some Rishonim say, based on the page over here, that the other sugyas are talking about that the fire did not take hold of it. That if you have a weekday korban, a Friday korban, that the fire did not yet take hold of it, then for sure you're not allowed to burn it on Shabbos. And I'll hold focus Rishonim how we paskin about that. That some say that you don't burn a weekday korban on Shabbos at all.
It's already tough.
It was already in this fast, right? So
what's the
no. Now
it's
now the fire is out already. But no, we're not talking about that the fire can let it continue burning. We're talking about that yesterday making a new fire. You're going to burn it. You put it onto the fire. But it already became what the Gemara calls it, the poskim lachmo shel mizbeach. It already became the mizbeach owns it already. So then it's not called anymore weekday korban. That it's already burning. So even though the fire is out already, and you're going to now put it on the fire again, but that's already the Mizbeach owns this korban, and then that be a best Torah.
This korban is not fully, didn't fully meet its requirement of being burned.
Yes, it's still here, but the fact that, but Mashla Ben Or. So since the fire already took over, it conquered it, so to speak. So then that might be as far that even though all the Gemara say that you don't burn a weekday korban on Shabbos, but if it already had the fire had already taken over, it became lachmo shel mizbeach. So then this is far that you would be allowed to burn it even on Shabbos also, and that's what our Gemara is talking about, just to reconcile the two sugyas. So that remains a machlokes Rishonim. Okay, that's the end of that sugya. Hope everybody enjoyed it, and now goes a new sugya, altogether new sugya, and this is based on the pasuk that says we learned yesterday. We learned the beginning of Parshat Sav, and a couple of times it says lo sichbeh, don't extinguish. It's also to extinguish. It says a couple of times over there, lo sichbeh, do not extinguish. And it comes out that it's a issue the raisa to extinguish the fire on the mizbeach. We might think that it means if you extinguish the whole fire, then you extinguish it. But if you extinguish one coal, so if there's plenty of fire going on, you might think it's not included. But that's not true. Even if you extinguish one coal from the fire of the mizbeach, it's an avera of lo sichbeh. And it talks about sometimes that if you have to sprinkle some liquid on the mizbeach, sometimes if it's shem or whatever it might be, the Gemara always talks about you're not allowed to extinguish the fire at all. And that's what our Gemara is based on. It takes for granted, everybody knows that you're not allowed to extinguish a coal on the Mizbeach. And now we're going to talk about if there's what the parameters of that is. So a whole new sugya, no shaykhs, so until now, a new sugya. Itma, hamacha be'esh machta u'menorah. That's the name of the subject. If somebody extinguished the fire of the machta or the menorah. So we had yesterday these two concepts, that the esh machta meant the coals they take off the mizbech in order to bring into the Kodesh HaKadoshim for Yom Kippur. And they maybe say, maybe here it's also even referring to any ketores. Whenever you take the Aruch HaShnir Shel Ketores, you take off coals off the mizbech in order to bring the ketores on the Pnei Mizbech HaPanimi. So once you shoveled up the coals for the purpose of lighting the menorah or for bringing the ketores, is it still called the fire of the mizbech? The pasuk talks about eish tamid tukat al mizbech lo sichbeh. So the simple words can be talking about when it's still on the mizbech. What about if you already shoveled it up in order to take it for a different mitzvah? Is it still issur to extinguish it? That's the sugya. So Gemara starts itma. We learned if somebody extinguishes the fire of that's in the fire pan that's designated now to bring the ketores, or the menorah, the fire which is designated to light the menorah from, is there an issur of extinguishing it? Abayi Amachai, Rav Amapada. Machlokis Abayi and Rava, if he's still Chai, Abayi says still Chai, Rava says he's Pater. The Gemara explains the caveat with Rosh Hashanah Mizbeach to Kol Yamalo Pligi the Chai. Everybody agrees if it's still on top of the Mizbeach, he just shoveled it up, the coals, and he did it for the purpose of bringing it to the ketores, but he's still on top of the Mizbeach. So then everybody holds that he's still Chai, because it's still considered Eshem Mizbeach, even though he shoveled it up and he has it in his fire pan, but he's still on top of the mizbech. It's still called Eshem Mizbech, and he'd be chayv if he extinguished.
He's on his way to the ketores.
But he's still on the mizbech. So it's called the Eshem Mizbech. It's called the fire of the mizbech, and if he extinguishes
so what's
it,
the correct thing to do? To just take it and run and just.
Why is he running? He should go slow. But when he wants to, but don't extinguish it. Again.
By standing there.
No. He extinguished it.
He
took some water and he put a cup of water. He extinguished it. Yeah, the issue is that he extinguished the fire. He stepped on whatever he did. So if he's on top of the mizbeach, so then even though he shoveled it up for the purpose of taking it to the menorah, taking it to the ketores, it's still called the fire of the mizbeach. And if he extinguishes it, it's avera. But ki pligi, what is the machlokas of Abayin Rava, where Rava's makel and says that he's pater, the achte ha'ara b'kavi. He took it down. The word achte means he took it down to the fire, to the ground, and he extinguished it over there. Means he took it off the mizbeach. So he's off the mizbeach, and he had taken it for the purpose of lighting the menorah, or the ketores. So then, Rava says pater. Even in this case is chayiv. Eish mizbechu. It's still considered the fire of the mizbeach. Rava Amar pater. Chivin the natka. The word natka is like hit not kut. It means disengaged. That he separated it. Since he separated it, he took it for the purpose. It's off the mizbeach, and also he took it for the purpose of the menorah or the ketores. So then he's pater. This was a statement of Nachman, the name of Rabbi Bar Hua. If somebody took down a coal from the mizbeach and he extinguished it off the mizbeach, he's still chayiv. Does that have anything to do with Abayi and Rava? Abayi said that he's chayiv even if he extinguished it, and Rava said that he's pater. Keman kabaye? Is it only like Abayi? Because Rava said that if he took off a coal for the purpose of the menorah, he's pater, and if he extinguishes it. And here, Rabbi Bar Hua said that if you extinguish a coal even off the mizbeach, he's still chayiv. Does that contradict Rava? So Gemara says no. Rava just said if he took it for the purpose of the menorah, like he started, the whole thing is talking about he did it for a good purpose. He did it for a mitzvah, not because it's a good purpose, but he designated, he separated it. He what's a good word? He detached it. He disengaged it from for the purpose of a mitzvah. So intikol mitzvah. So now also the fact that it's off the mizbeach. According to the first version we just finished learning, the only one who's lenient is Rava, and he has to have two conditions. What we call tatel l'tevusa. There has to be two things going for him: that it's off the mizbeach, and also it was done for a mitzvah. If he's taking the fire for the menorah, for the ketores, and also he's off the mizbeach, now Rava says if he extinguishes it, he's pater. But if it will be on top of the mizbeach, he's chayiv, even though he took it off for the menorah.
If he extinguishes it, isn't that calling the question whether he did it for the mitzvah?
He did. He had taken for the mitzvah. He had taken for, but it's not called Eisha Mizbeach anymore.
But why would he extinguish it then? If he didn't?
Yeah, he should. Yeah, why is he? Maybe he has that. A lot of calls. He did some of them. But even if he did extinguish all of it, so he changed his mind or he forgot, whatever it might be. But is it called Eisha Mizbeach? Is it called the fire of the Mizbeach? So if he had taken it off the Mizbeach, so it's not so much Eisha Mizbeach. And also the reason why he took it was for an official reason. He took it off for a good reason. So not because he's going to use it for the menorah is the reason why he's put there. The fact that it was separated from the Mizbeach for the purpose
But
of
also,
the
it
menorah.
also has to be both.
Has to be both. It has to be off the Mizbeach, and also that it was taken for a good reason. Not for a good reason, for a mitzvah reason. It was taken for a mitzvah reason. That means that it's not Eisha Mizbeach. It's now it's transformed into the fire of the Ketoros and the. But provided that it's off the Mizbeach. So that's the end of the first.
Pater of al asr.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Pater still means pater of al asr. So even for a mitzvah, it's pater of al asr.
Yeah, the whole Gemara, that's nice. The Gemara doesn't say you're allowed to. The Gemara says that he's potter if he did it, he didn't transgress, but doesn't say he's allowed to do it. Yes, that's a good point. So that was the first lashon that Rava says if somebody extinguished the fire after it was taken off for a mitzvah and it's off the mizbeach, he's potter. And on the top of the mizbeach, everybody else chayiv, even if he did it for a mitzvah. And if he's off the mizbeach, but he didn't take it off for the purpose of a mitzvah, also it's still called fire of the mizbeach. But if you have both conditions, then Rabbi will say that he's potter. Abai says even that is chayiv. Abai doesn't have any ptor. Abai says blanket statement is fire of the mizbeach, even if it's off the mizbeach, and even if it was taken off for a mitzvah, disengaged for a mitzvah, still is considered the fire of the mizbeach.
Isn't he supposed to take that coal and go put it on the Ketoros? What's he doing?
Yeah, we didn't say he's supposed to do like Emmanuel said. Not that he's we tell him to do it, but if he did it, he's potter. That's not the subject. No, you can say also he did it by mistake, so it's a shogeg, but he didn't have Is it considered that he extinguished the fire of the mizbeach? We're not coming to say what he should
It
do.
sounds like a mirror, like he took something from the Mizbech and he used his own das, so his own personal.
No. It's not that he's doing it for mitzvah also. It's not.
What's the mitzvah he's doing?
He took it down in order to take it for the menorah.
Why is he now putting it off?
We're just being magdir. Is it called Eisha Mizbeach? You get it? We're talking about, is it called Eisha Mizbeach? If it's not Eisha
Sounds
Mizbeach,
like it. It sounds like it's Eisha Mizbeach.
so maybe it's not. It's Eisha Menorah.
Yeah.
It's not Eisha Mizbeach. It's Eisha Menorah, and it's not. It's so far removed. Two reasons why it's not Eisha Mizbeach. First of all, it's not on the Mizbeach, and also that it was taken to be Eisha Menorah, Eisha Ketoros. It's mashma the Gemara is only if he did it for a mitzvah. If he would have taken it down, like the Gemara says, everyone agrees. If he didn't take it off for a mitzvah reason, so then it's still called Eisha Mizbeach, even after he takes it off.
Rebbe, here's where the proper definition of netek comes into play. Netek normally in modern Hebrew means not just disengaged, but cut off. It's cut off from the first thing, it becomes another thing.
Mm-hmm. So here, good. So here it became cut off from the Mizbeach, being designated for a mitzvah, but it's not enough. It also has to be off the Mizbeach physically also. Okay, that was the first version. Now starts the second version. First line, Ikadami, others have a different version in this whole thing. This case, where he took it off the Mizbeach and then extinguished it, everyone would say it's potter. Again, the whole thing starts off, that was the title of the whole sugya. He took off fire for the purpose of Ketoros or the menorah, and he took it off the Mizbeach. Everyone holds that, even Abai holds that he's potter. He pleaded the Kavya Rosh Hashanah Mizbeach, but the Machokas of Rav is if he extinguished it while it's on the Mizbeach. Abai says it's on the Mizbeach, so even though he took it off for the purpose of the menorah or the Ketoros, but it's still on the Mizbeach, so it's called the Eisha Mizbeach. Rabbi says that once he cut it off, once he disengaged it, so then it's already, even on top of the Mizbeach, is also not considered the Eisha Mizbeach anymore. The Gemara wants to know, how does all this reconcile with Rav Nachman Amar Rabba Baravua? Elohad Amar Rav Nachman Amar Rabba Baravua Amar Gechelas Me'al Gabi HaMizbeach V'Kiba Chayiv Keman Lo Kabai V'Lo Karava. That Rabba Baravua said if somebody takes off a coal off the Mizbeach and he extinguished it off the Mizbeach, he's Chayiv. And both of Ayin Rabba said off the Mizbeach he's potter. So did they argue on him? So the Gemara right away says, you missed it. Hasam lo intik l'mitzvasa, hachi intik l'mitzvasa. Everybody agrees to Rabbi Baravua that if you took it off for no reason, so then it's called Eisha Mizbeach, even though it's off the Mizbeach physically. But the whole subject only starts when he did it for a mitzvah. He disengaged it, he cut it off because he wanted to take it for the menorah, and that's why he's changing, it's transforming it from Eisha Mizbeach to Eish Menorah, Eish Ketoros. So that's when they said that off the Mizbeach is potter. According to the second version is more lenient, and it says that if it's if it's off the Mizbeach and also was taken for the menorah or the Ketoros, so then everybody would hold that it's potter, it's not called Eisha Mizbeach. Rav is even lenient on top of the Mizbeach. Just the fact that he took it for the purpose of being Eish Menorah, Eish Ketoros, that already makes that it should not be considered Eisha Mizbeach. So we pass like the second version according to Rava, and it comes out that there's only one criteria. Everything depends if it was taken for the menorah or not. Intikal mitzvah. Is that a reason to be potter? So Rava says, we say potter, even on top of the mizbeach, and being off the mizbeach is nothing. It doesn't care if it's off the mizbeach. According to Abai, both the Tate Litegus, both things going for you. So then Abai also will agree that it's potter. But we pass like Rava that even if it's on the mizbeach, as long as he took it for the menorah or for the Ketores, it's already intik. Everything, one criteria. According to the first version, Rav is only making if you have both things going for you, off the mizbeach and was taken off for a mitzvah. And we pass on the second version that according to Rav, that even everything is totally in one condition, if it was taken for a mitzvah or not. Taken off for a different mitzvah from menorah to as potter, no matter where you are, up or down. And if it was not taken for a mitzvah, you're going to be chayiv, no matter where you are, up or down. That's how I pass it.
The line in the rock, the Rabbeinu Hananel on the bottom of the daf is perfectly clear. He says, Rava Amar Potter. Why? Kevan denatka lamachte. Kevan denatka lamachte ola hadlakas hamenorah yotza mitaris eish mizbeach venasis eish michmachte umenorah.
Very good. That everything depends. This fact that he transformed this purpose, so now it's not any more called Eish Mizbech. So what do we get out of all this? That you're not allowed to extinguish a fire on the Mizbech, even a coal, even if the fire is a raging fire, even to extinguish one coal is already an Aveira. And if it's on the Mizbech, it's surely Aser, and even off the Mizbech is Aser. But if you took it for the purpose of transforming it to become now the Eish HaMenorah or Eish HaKtoris, then it's not anymore called Eish Mizbech, and you'll be potter. Maybe it's even mutter already, I don't know.
Even if you're on the mizbeach.
Right. We pass like the second verse, even on the Mizbech, whoever holds that is potter, that's how we pass it. So it doesn't make a difference physically if you're up or down, it's still called Eish Mizbech, unless you gave it a different name by taking it for the purpose of Eish Menorah or Eish Mizbech.
Rebbe,
So,
where would we come to a day to think it's mutter when it's clear the lashon of the Gemara is potter of al-aser?
it could be, but it could be. But the fact that over here we're saying that it's not anymore called Eish Mizbeach. So does that mean that it's still you're not allowed to? If it's not called Eish Mizbeach, maybe you have to say it's still called Eish Mizbeach something. If you can say that it's Asr, you must say because it is called Eish Mizbeach. There's no Isser to extinguish Eish Menorah, Eish Maktoris. So if you're going to say that it's Asr, it has to be.
We had so many things already in Yuma about the avoda where we ushered only because of chashad. So why not at least because of that here? I mean, it looks bad, like Chaim David said.
Okay, good. Yashikov. So we had two sugyas today, and the first sugya was about it was revolving around Rav Meir about making an extra fire in the weekday, but it seems that Pashup Shan Gemara might be that it goes back to the main sugya. Are you allowed to burn a weekday korban on Shabbos? And our Gemara seems to make a machlokas out of it. Two pshat, Bar Kapar said it's mutter. Rabba said it's mutter. Rav Chisda and Rabba were arguing if Avuna said it's mutter or not. That comes out one sugya, and maybe it doesn't apply only to Rav Meir. It comes out being contra Rabbanan. You have sugya someplace else that say for sure you're not allowed to burn a weekday korban on Shabbos and Yantif. And to reconcile that, some say that our Gemara is talking about when the fire was mashla ben or maybe that makes it more lenient, and that comes out to be a machlokas rishonim. It seems the Chofetz Chaim is a machlokas rishonim. The second sugya, besides what we had in Rav Meir personally, his shita by making extra fire, that the Gemara spoke about if it was puzzle, and if mashal ben or after making a special fire. The second sugya was about extinguishing a fire, and just to say the halacha, we passing like Rava that if it was taken off the mizbech, picked up, shoveled up for the purpose of the menorah, the ketores is not called Eish Mizbech. He's potter if he extinguishes it, even on top of the mizbech. If it was not done for a mitzvah, just his son picked it up, that even if he's off the mizbech, also he still be chayiv. It's called Eish Mizbech. We finished the fourth parak, and whoever has an scroll has to get now the next volume to start the second half of Maseches Yom.
Hadron alok teref bekalpi. Hadron alok teref bekalpi. Hadron alok teref bekalpi.
Thank you, Eshikar. Thank you. So we'll be back in a couple of minutes for Hilchos Shabbos.